Hello, everybody, especially the body. I have with me today Liam and our special guest star, BOC member, Sterling Perry. How you going, Sterling?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
That is good. So,
Thank you for having
Sterling,
me.
no worries. Sterling, tell my viewers more about yourself and where you're from.
Well, I'm from Mobile, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
I've spent my life here. I've left here about a dozen times, but I always come back. And now, in my elderly age, I've decided this is where I'm going to be until I'm not here anymore.
Mm-hmm. So, did you grow up in the Christian religion?
Yes, very early. My family was all in the Baptist religion, hard shell Baptist, different types of Baptist. They were all there. Two of my uncles were preachers, and my grandfather was a Baptist preacher, so I was acquainted with the Baptist religion from birth, pretty much.
So, what was it like to grow up in the Christian religion?
It was horrifying.
Mm, yeah. So, tell us more about your experiences in Christianity.
Well, even as a small child, I couldn't conceive the idea that God would create us foreknowing who His creation is, or that He created us and then is going to torture us and burn us from hell.
Mm,
Even as a small child, I couldn't make any sense out of that. That was insanity to me. And then they were preaching you had to live up to the law. You have to do this and you have to do that, or you're going to burn in hell forever. Well, they're doing the same thing themselves that they were telling me I was going to burn for. So I could never make any sense out of that. It wasn't rational to me.
hmm. So, did those involved in religion pressure you to be involved in the churches?
Well, I got tired of the Baptist religion by the time I was 13 years old because I just couldn't conform that God was going to torture us in hell forever. I just could not conceive that, even as a child or young. So I started searching different religions. I searched
Hmm.
the the Methodist and the Catholic, the Holiness. Just checked out the different churches for a short period of time, and it didn't take very long at all out of any of them to realize, no, this is not what I'm looking for. I wasn't aware of what I was looking for, but I knew that that wasn't what I needed, what I was looking for. So over a
Hmm.
period of time and reading all the information I could find in many books about religion and the different sets and different beliefs and Buddhism, you name it,
Yeah.
I met a man when I was 17 years old that introduced me to the concordant scriptures. And it only took a very short time, just a couple of weeks, and I realized that this is what I had been searching for, that it had the answers of what I was seeking. And I've been in it since 1972.
Hmm.
That's a long time. That's a long time that you've been a believer. What was your family's reaction when you left their church? Because you left quite early on, right?
I was already outcast from them to begin with, so it didn't matter. Uh, I didn't lose out on anything from them because I was never accepted in my own family except by my mother. She's the only one. She was basically outcast too. So we moved away from family and pretty much stayed to ourselves.
Yeah. So, how did you view God's character when you're in the Christian religion? Did you think he was like angry or mean or that kind of thing?
No, no. I've
Mm-hmm.
never believed that he was angry or mean.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't, I just can't conceive God that way as angry or mean. They were always telling me to be afraid, to be afraid all the time. And my heart inside of me and my spirit just I couldn't conceive God in that manner because I've always seen God as my only father. I didn't have a real father in my life growing up. So he was that father for me. And
Mm,
I couldn't believe that, what they were telling me.
yeah.
And they must have known that you weren't listening to their teaching, so they probably isolated you more because of that, because you weren't going to their church services and believing in all of their doctrines. So they probably isolated you more because of that.
Yes, absolutely. I was an outcast from them. Uh, I had one uncle that the family was so many members of the family, aunts, cousins, you name it, uncles. There was over 300 members just in one of them's churches that I was supposed to go to, and I couldn't participate with it because I didn't see it as being truth or truly loving one another because it was all hypocritical. They would
Mm-hmm.
dress in their suits on Sunday and go in and be all self-righteous on Sunday, and then Monday morning they'd go back to regular life of doing whatever. Then when next Sunday came, they would all pretend like nothing happened during the week. I couldn't conform to that. I wouldn't. If I
Mm-hmm.
was guilty, I was better off just to say I'm wrong. I was a whole lot better off just to be honest. I felt a whole lot better about it.
So how old were you when you thought, I gotta get out of this religion?
12 years old.
Mm,
That's young.
yeah.
That's really young. And for all those reasons that you stated, of their just blatant hypocrisy, narcissism, and vanity. And that was instilled in you by God because no one else taught you that. It wasn't your father or your uncles or anything like that. That's a gift from God.
It's like what Paul says, I was taught by Christ himself inside, the spirit within. He's always been there as long as I can remember. We've always talked and had communication with one another. Well, I couldn't talk to any of my family. They were just
Mm,
as, to me, was worse than the strangers on the street. I had better success talking to strangers than I did with my family.
mm-hmm. So when did you leave Christianity and why did you leave Christianity?
Well, I left Christianity as far as the Baptist religion, when I was 13 years old. And I
Mm-hmm.
left because of the hypocrisy of the church that I was going to at the time, knowing it was already there. And what happened was we had a local phone booth that was the only phone booth in a long distance from where we were. So I was very gifted. I bugged the phone booth. So I listened to all the conversations of what everyone was doing and what was going on. Found out that the preacher was having an affair with one of the deacon's wives.
Mm,
So I verified the fact. I got on my bicycle and rode to the meeting place where they went, and I watched the whole deal go down. So I went to the
mm,
church the next Sunday, and the first thing that the preacher started talking about on the pulpit was, if you commit adultery, you're going to burn in hell forever. And that was the end of my relationship with the Baptist altogether. I am done. Thank you.
yeah.
That is a
Yeah.
gift. That really is a gift because I got you out of religion real early when you were 13 years old. Whereas
Yeah.
compared to a
It's
lot of the
great.
people that Catherine has interviewed, they came out of religion in their 40s or 50s or even their 60s. So they spent the
Mm,
majority of their lives underneath this dogmatic, oppressive religion, whereas you only spent about 13 years, which is itself a
I feel
gift.
I have a great sorrow for people that's been locked up for decades in religion. It's
oh
like
yeah.
being in a prison. Prison for your mind, being tortured all the
Bondage.
time.
Definitely
Yeah,
bondage for me. 41
yeah,
years of it. So yeah.
yeah. I have pitiful compassion for them that they were locked
Oh
up
yeah.
that long.
Definitely.
Did you
Me
try
too.
to tell your family members when you came in more and more to the truth that were still in religion, like when you came to the knowledge of the salvation of all, or just simple things that God is love, that He'd never torture people forever? Did you try to tell your uncles and your mother and your family members about these things?
Well, my mother understood a great deal more than the rest of the family. The rest
Mm-hmm.
of them were so entwined with one another that they didn't want anyone to disturb their set
Mm-hmm.
or peace or group
Yeah.
together.
Mm-hmm.
My mother went. she had a very difficult life, and she was more astute to have faith in God than they were.
Hmm. So did you just attend the Baptist churches? Or was it
No,
completely Baptist or other ones when you were in Christianity?
well, I really won't say I attended. I visited, you might say, other
Hmm.
churches just to see
Yeah.
what their doctrine was and what they were teaching. That's when I
Hmm.
was searching for the. That's when I was searching for the truth. That was in
Yeah.
between walking away from the Baptist and coming into being introduced to the Concordant. That went on from the time I was 13, mid 13, till I was 16, right at 17 years. That was in
Hmm.
1972 when I came into the realization of the Concordant and Paul's Evangel.
So
What?
when did you get your
That,
first concordant
Uh,
literal New Testament?
that was by the time I was 18, but I had access to one through a friend of mine who introduced me to it. His name was
Hmm.
Thomas Hinton. He was an
Hmm.
elderly man that I met in a hardware store. Was having a conversation with him when I was in there purchasing things, asking questions from him.
Hmm.
So we became friends, and we spent quite a bit of time together. And he introduced me to it. Then Greg and I went to a convention in Kissimmee, Florida,
Hmm.
and got a lot of material from there, and got our
Yeah.
own copies and all that.
So you would have read a lot of Enoch and all those concordant type people as well.
What?
Yes,
So
Yeah.
what was
man.
it like just coming into that truth? Because he would have talked about the salvation of all, about God's sovereignty, and about all these things. I mean, that must have been amazing just coming into that truth.
Well, it gave me an expectation of peace. It gave me peace, but it also gave me an expectation knowing that I was just beginning to see the truth, that there was more coming. So it was kind of like a premonition of knowing that I was finally on the right path,
Hmm.
that God was working to do what he needed to do. It was all by his purpose. I came into that understanding,
Mm.
knowing that there was much to come.
So when you came into the truth, what were your struggles and trials and tribulations that you went through?
Uh, Dealing with my own flesh more than anything, and dealing with the flesh of people around me. And
Hmm.
it's just what Paul says: the flesh is warring against the spirit, and the spirit's warring against the flesh. To come into a awareness of that is not something that happens overnight. That's something that takes time going through life to fully understand and come into a good apprehension of
Hmm.
how God is operating through us all for that purpose, to show us himself, reveal himself and his love to us. So we have to suffer those things in order to see how much he does love us. That's
Yeah.
sharing this, that's the fellowship of Christ's sufferings that we all go through. So that makes us all connected as one in that. I'm not unique in that at all. We've all gone through that and still do.
Hmm. So what were your good and bad experiences heralding the truth?
Dealing with people that I thought were rooted and grounded in the truth, but find out that they weren't being truthful or not yet learned to be truthful about it, thinking that someone was your associate and that you could trust them and it would go back to the flesh, and that was the hardest part to go through, to love them anyway, to follow what
Hmm.
Paul was telling us to do and love them regardless of what they do as God loves us. That was the hardest thing to deal with.
Yeah,
Yep.
we can all relate to that. That's for sure. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
You've
There's
been,
many times when that's the case. It's
yeah.
you talked about Greg and how you both kind of became believers before, like at the same time. So what was, and you went to that conference at the same time too. So what was that like? Like what was that conference like? Just being around all these people who have been in the truth for decades and decades, and you got all these books and all this understanding just all at once. Tell us what that was like.
It it was a wonderful experience. The hard part about the experience was the fact that they were all elderly, and we were by far the youngest that were there, that were participating.
Yeah.
And that was the hardest part, because there was still a separation between us because of age and distance, especially at the time. It was very difficult for us to go there because we didn't have a vehicle. We hitchhiked the 1,000 miles there and back.
Wow.
Mhm.
That sounds like it could be made into a movie.
Yeah. So you've been a believer for 50 years, haven't you?
Yeah, 52
And
years at this point. Yeah.
52 years. So has there been any changes in the body over the years that you've noticed?
Oh, yes. Over the last year, I see more change and growth in the body than I have in the previous 50 years before. The
Mhm.
body's growing faster and articulating with one another. It's God is answering a prayer that I've had for a long time, and I'm seeing it unfold. It's bringing me a great joy seeing the body grow like this.
Mhm.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that the body is growing so fast now as opposed to 30 or 50 years ago?
It wasn't time. It wasn't God's time yet. He hadn't finished. I don't believe he had finished teaching us what we needed to know. And also, even more so important than that, we're filling up the deficiencies for Christ through our sufferings, and sharing the sufferings in his fellowship. So I don't believe that we had gone through enough of that yet to fulfill that, to fill up those deficiencies. But I believe that time is coming to a conclusion. I believe we're there or very close to it.
I
Mhm.
think that the internet has helped a lot too.
Yes,
Because back when you were 16, it would have been you had to hitchhike to meet your believers there to go to conferences. But now we can do this. I'm in Scotland and you're in Alabama and Catherine's in Australia, and we're all communicating
yeah,
all at once. That means, yeah, that's really good. So the growth is going to increase exponentially because of that, and you see that
yeah,
all throughout the last 10 years and even the last year. The growth is just accelerating, going up and up and up and up.
yes. It's accelerating exponentially.
Mhm. So what people
That's
influenced you in coming into the truth? Who did God use for you to come
Apart
into
from
the
that
truth?
man who gave you the concordance.
Hmm.
There was no one other than that one man that
Okay.
promoted me to go into the truth. It was always been my desire to know. I just wanted to know the truth. My life was so extreme the way I was raised that
Mhm.
I wanted to know what was really going on, because I couldn't find it through anyone else's experience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What was that?
it
Sorry, Lee.
it's
Yep.
definitely different because I've been a believer for like a year now. So I grew up, I say grew up as in just growing in the realization of the truth during a time when the internet was like, well, the internet is a big thing now. So I can connect with you and Catherine and Norman and Peter Maya and everyone else all across the earth, whereas you didn't have that. So you're
Mm.
so the level of mentors and mentorship and people you can learn from is lower than it was when you were my age, as opposed to now. Like that's like a huge, like that's such an interesting thing that God is doing. So that's probably another reason why the growth is just so high now. It's like we can just bounce off each other, but there is a downside to that. It means that there's going to be a lot of friction, a lot of arguments too.
Well, the more
Yeah.
people you get involved, the more schisms you have.
Yep.
So that's why it's so important for us to be rooted and grounded in love and not that be disturbing us. Because that's what the adversary stratagem is to try to get us discouraged and angry and at discord to other people. And that's the most important part of this thing, is to follow the example of Paul. He went through all of that, all the persecutions, the beatings, the stonings, the shipwrecks, but it never discouraged him from loving one another, and it never took his faith away from him. He
Yeah.
set the example as a man without. He deemed everything else forfeit, refuge to follow Christ. He deemed everything else forfeit for the superiority of the knowledge of Christ. That to
Mhm.
me is the foremost thing to keep in mind, because Christ did it and proved it to us by giving his life for us and becoming sin itself for us. And in order for us to become the display of Christ, we have to do the same thing and follow his example and Paul's example as a human to that with one another, and not be discouraged about anything. To be setting the example so that Christ himself is manifested in us.
Hmm. You must have felt so isolated at one stage, not being able to communicate with other believers. When was it
That's,
that you were able to communicate with other believers more?
well, the isolation, uh, looking at that, that is a severe understatement. I felt like I was totally alone in the wilderness
Yeah,
with no one there.
yeah,
That
yeah.
is until you met all of us, but also Michael Knox.
Yeah.
You told me before that you met him just over a year ago now. So tell us
Mhm.
what that was like, because you and Michael and Marcia and Alicia and Judy have been doing these articles for about a year now, if I'm
Yeah.
correct.
And how did you
You know,
meet
a
Mike?
little,
Mm.
I was watching Michael's videos. I had been talking with Tony Nungesser at the Concordant for a very long time. I've known him for close to 30 years, and we couldn't ever really connect on the level of things that we were discussing.
Mhm.
So anyway, he hung up on me one day, and that was okay because we weren't getting anywhere. And I was
Mhm.
watching Michael's videos quite some time before that, and he was doing a reading or study on Ephesians, and he got to the word called articulate, and he was having a difficult time with the word and understanding. So I got on the phone and I called him and I asked him, "Can we articulate?" So we went through the definition of the word articulate and what it means. Together connect. We're together connect. To get rid of the space between the schisms, whatever. And ever since then, we've been teaching one another. I learned from him. He learns from me. Now we've got Alicia that's coming along at a great pace, unbelievable. Judy's the same way. Marcia's the same way. Now both of you are the same. So I'm seeing us grow and being rooted and grounded in love and not being disturbed. So I'm observing the body grow. I'm happy. It fills me full of joy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's go back to dealing with patience. So you've been a believer for over 50 years. And I know that you've told me in private that you've been heralding the truth to not just the believers, but just to the peoples of the world, like when you go to bars or when you meet people throughout all of your life. What is the key to patience? What would be the key factors of dealing great graciously with people? Because there's a lot of people out there that will just mock you for these beliefs.
The key to patience to me is realizing my own falling short and how patient our Father has been with me and being there beside me no matter what I've done wrong, no matter how many mistakes I've made. He's always been there. He's never left me alone. And that's what I'm pursuing to do for everyone else as he does. It's simple. It's a simple thing. Ephesians 5:1 and 2. Become then imitators of God as beloved children and be loving one another as he does you. And then we've got the other part where it says, be dealing graciously with one another as he's dealt graciously with you. By keeping that in mind foremost, I have to have patience or I become vain and say I'm better than someone else, which I am not.
Yeah.
Has there been times where you have done that in the past, where you've become vain, or you've said that I'm better than you, like in the past, and you've learned from those experiences?
Yeah. Honestly, yes. Without admitting that, I can't be humble. Without the
Mhm.
admission of that, I'm still vainglorious and puffed up. I don't know. I have to admit, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very difficult when you're heralding the truth to people. And it's not just to believers because we have the same spirit, but it's also to the people of the world too. Like, if you were to speak to your family, if they were still here, if you were to tell them what you know now, they would just reject you. They would probably call you the Antichrist. And that is teaching us patience, real patience.
Well, to learn also that it's not their calling. They weren't chosen before the disruption of the world in Christ. Coming into a realization of that has been a great relief as well, because they're doing exactly what they were created to do. They're not doing anything wrong or out of place. They just don't know. They're ignorant. They're locked up in stubbornness. So to realize that, Paul tells us to have pitiful compassion on them.
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
So you were saying about your sufferings. Now, I know that you've told me a lot of things to do with your sufferings in the past. Can you tell us a little bit about the many sufferings that you've endured, just physical sufferings and mental sufferings? Because we know that all of our sufferings are for the benefit of not just ourselves, but for Christ. Can you go into a little bit of what you've suffered in this world?
Well, uh, that's there's a lot there. Uh, let's just say I don't even want to discuss my relationship with my real father, if you call it a relationship at all, for the short, brief moments that were involved.
Mm.
So let's just jump on past that till the point I was 6 years old when my mother married my first stepfather. I thought maybe I would finally have a childhood, but it didn't work out that way. When I was 7 years old, I got a sling blade to cut the grass for my 7th birthday, and he put me in the truck and took me to the job site where they were laying asphalt, put a shovel in my hand, and I was told that you either work or we're going to have a problem, basically, to put it politely. So by
Mhm.
the extreme that he put me through, I was running a full construction crew by the time I was 16 years old. By the time I had a vehicle, I was running a 15-man crew, building big resorts and parking lots for hospitals and grocery centers and roads and highways. That was the beginning of my life, which was interesting. At the
Mhm.
time, it was horrible. It was totally horrible. But now I look back at it, God gave me an unbelievably gracious gift.
Yeah.
I
I
mean, when
see.
I was
Cool. Yep, go. Go.
when I was growing up, because I had no father, my mother couldn't support me. Uh, so I was passed around from to my aunt and uncles, 3 different sets, and they all had many children, and I was
Mm.
the youngest of all of them. So that was the beginning before I was given the shovel and a sling blade.
Mhm.
Uh, I've always been an outcast from it all. Always.
That's something that we can all relate to. Definitely. I see
Yep.
a lot of parallels between Paul's life when he became a believer in your life. Because we know that Paul was shipwrecked 4 times, he was blinded, stoned, abused, and imprisoned. And I know a lot about you, and I know that you suffered a lot of stuff when it comes to being blinded and illnesses and all these things. And it's honestly a miracle that you're still here. It really is.
Well,
By the grace of God. Yeah.
I
Mm.
don't even consider the cancer and the West Nile and all the wrecks and losing my teeth, losing my eyesight.
Mm.
That's all physical things. The mental suffering is much more intense and much worse than the physical suffering to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's many layers. Like you said, like there's Michael Knotts who suffers from cancer. There's people's wives who are suffering from cancer, West Nile disease and
Yeah.
depression, and all these different things like mental illnesses. It's I definitely agree with you that the mental side of it is worse because it plays on the mind more and on the spirit more as opposed to just physical things.
Well, when I
Mm.
got West Nile, God gave me total amnesia. I didn't even know my own name for months. I was blind for almost 3 months. It took my eyesight away from me, took all my memory away from me. Took me a few years to recover and put all the pieces back together.
So,
It's a very interesting story to have to learn who you are all over again from
Yeah.
scratch.
so you
Yeah.
lost all your understanding to do with scripture at that point, and then you had to relearn it.
Yeah.
So what was that
Mhm.
like? That must have been crazy.
It's been a wonderful, interesting journey. I'll say that. It's not been boring.
Yeah, definitely. That's it's something that people can find encouragement from because they'll see you and then they'll
Well, I believe
see
that's
all
what
the exactly. Yeah.
I believe that's why all this is taking place is for the betterment of the ecclesia, for the betterment of the body, to prove to everyone that we can undergo anything. Love can undergo, it does undergo, it endures, and it conquers everything. Doesn't matter what we're subjected to. That's what Christ did. He proved that to us, and so did Paul. So I believe that was part of what God is doing with me in my life. I'm just being given an honest account of what I've been through.
You've been friends with Greg for what, like 40 years or something like that? So what's that been like, just having a believer as a friend for that long?
Well, I met Greg in the ninth grade. In the ninth grade, I was 15 years
Wow.
old.
Yeah.
See, I was very jealous of Greg for a long time because he had freedom. He didn't have to work. He didn't have all these things. His parents let him do whatever. So I was jealous of
Yeah.
the freedom that he had, and that was one of the things that bonded us together. But
Yep.
over time, I learned that that freedom has a price, and I've learned because of that that I'm very grateful for what I went through, and I am who I am. I've learned to be grateful in that in which I have been created. So everything has a
Mm.
price. So that's been part of our learning process, knowing one another through many things, good and bad. I mean, we got at such a discord at one time, I didn't talk to Greg for almost 10 years.
Wow. Yep.
And he pulled you guys back.
Yeah, yeah.
He always
And
does.
it's been back and forth, and now I'm praying that we're connecting in truth to this. I can't fault Greg for anything because
Mhm.
he was put there to teach me the value of all this. So I'm very grateful, realizing that we're part of one another in in that understanding. So I have
Mhm.
my own faults that are involved to things as well. So I have to be truthful and be humble and say, okay, are we going to do this in love or uh, whatever? You know, I'm not. I don't want to waste my time doing something that's in faction. Put it that way.
Do you have any advice for those coming who are new into the truth?
Try to listen to their elders with more patience instead of thinking you know everything. Try to do it more
Yeah.
one on one instead of in a group. Find someone you can connect with and grow with that's willing to share with you and participate with you, and don't
Mhm.
waste or use the time unwisely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would definitely agree with that. To all of you guys out there are new believers, which is also me too. That's very good advice.
Yeah, that's true for us
Yeah.
all. That's true for us all.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story today, Sterling. And thanks to my co host of my live streams, Liam. And yeah, so love, grace, and peace, everyone.
This was a great interview. You spilled a lot of beans,
Thank,
a lot of beneficial stuff there.
thank you for having me. I love you both.
Love, grace, and peace to
Love
you
you
both. And
too.
love, grace, and peace to all you guys and gals that are watching this. God loves you.